Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. His palm sealed my airway and my ears roared. I tapped twice against his forearm and clawed for space. He held a fraction longer and the room lurched sideways. I thought I counted 6 before the dark took me. I woke facing the headboard and swallowed knives. I'm Eva, 27, and I know the safe word. My tongue felt slow and my lungs hurt like I had sprinted stairs. He was already timing something again. What was he logging now? Breathe with me. He hovered close, steady as a metronome. I inhaled on his cue and hated the script. My hands shook while I matched his count. His watch hummed against my cheek and I flinched. I pushed up and reached for water that wasn't there. He handed a glass like a magician with a quiet flourish. The stopwatch on the counter glowed with a neat lap number. My chest tightened because he cared about the number more than me. 8.7, he tapped the face and smiled small. I stared at the decimals like they were teeth. He kissed my temple without asking. I stiffened and pretended not to notice the tremor. I said we needed to stop because my head pounded. He nodded once and reset the watch with his thumb. That reset felt like a promise I didn't want. My mouth formed thanks, though my stomach twisted hard. He tried a joke and waited for my laugh. I delivered a thin sound that passed as fine. He watched my pupils like he was checking a specimen. That look scratched something old and ugly in me. I stood and the floor dipped like a boat. He slid an arm out to steady me and measured my sway. "You're okay," he murmured with confident warmth. The warmth felt borrowed, like he practiced it elsewhere. My phone buzzed somewhere under a cushion. He picked it up faster than me and held it just out of reach. "Group chat again," he said with that mild tone. My palm opened for it and he hesitated one beat too long. I took the phone and pretended to read nothing. In truth, the screen showed 3 missed calls from Lena. I locked the phone because my cheeks betrayed me. He noticed and masked the notice with a stretch. "I want a shower," my throat rasped and the words scraped. He nodded and offered to draw it and I shook no. I wanted a door between us and water loud enough to hide fear. Under the spray, I counted my own seconds, too fast. The steam didn't soothe and my hands found bruises. I pressed each spot until the ache bloomed clean. Clean pain made decisions sharper than comfort ever did. A towel slipped and I saw fingerprints that didn't look like play. I heard my name through the door, too casual. "All good," I threw back with a steady fake. The fake cracked when I pictured his watch face again. I dressed and kept my movements simple and quick. He leaned on the frame and tracked each step. "You scared me," he said with a soft frown. The softness felt rehearsed and expensive. I tapped, my voice held and my eyes didn't. He lifted both hands in gentle surrender and lowered them slow. The slowness read like strategy, not care. He moved to the kitchen and opened a drawer. The watch went in and the drawer clicked shut. No clatter, like everything had its labeled place and purpose. "I can sleep here tonight," he offered with light patience. "We'll go slower next time." He watched my breath settle, not my face. Next time sounded like a schedule I hadn't agreed to. I asked where the stopwatch data lived and waited. He leaned back and said, "Workouts, nothing interesting." My mouth curved and my teeth stayed together. Workouts don't measure my blackout. I picked up my bag and felt its humiliating lightness. Essentials only, I told myself, just in case. That case used to be a wild movie in my head. Tonight it felt like a Tuesday plan. He stepped closer and reached for my wrist. I let him take my pulse and regretted it instantly. Counting me became a way to hold me. I pulled back and his mouth twitched. "Take a night to reset," I said with careful calm. His jaw worked and then settled into a pleasant shape. Pleasant shapes conceal sharp edges. I breathed through the old instinct to appease. He nodded like a therapist and walked to the door. "Text when you land," he added, voice smooth. Land where? The question hung between us and weighed more than my bag. I stepped into the hall and kept my spine tall. He watched me like a scientist watches a flame. The elevator chimed and I tasted metal. I told myself the taste meant movement and not dread. When the doors closed, I checked my reflection and winced. My pupils still dilated like I'd fled a fire. The wince passed and something colder settled in. I was done being timed without consent. As I reached the lobby, my phone lit up again. Lena's name pulsed with urgency. I answered and she asked one question. "Are you out?" And the echo in my ribs said, "Not yet." I answered Lena before the elevator finished dropping. Her breath hit fast through the speaker and pulled mine along. "Downstairs," I said, and the doors opened like a dare. I walked out because moving felt safer than thinking. She rolled to the curb and leaned across from me. I climbed in and shut the door hard. "Marks," she said, and her eyes jumped to my neck. I nodded once because denial wastes time in nights like this. We didn't talk about comfort, we counted options. Hospital meant questions, home meant exposure, her place meant witnesses nearby if I screamed. We took the route that let us change course mid-block. My phone shivered with his message before the first light. "You okay?" Then a timestamp with an exact duration. My pulse answered for me and gave away the truth. I muted the thread and saved the screen. Lena drove and kept her knuckles set. "He'll issue calm lines," she said with a quick glance. "He'll aim for compliance within an hour." I stared at the time and felt the clockwork inside his tone. Another text landed with a neat suggestion. "Slow breathing tomorrow," then a heart and a checkmark. I typed 2 letters and deleted them. He was building a script while I practiced refusal I hadn't used. "Test him," Lena said as she parked tight. "Send a boundary and note the delay. Data sounds cold until it keeps you breathing." I wrote 1 sentence and watched for patterns like a detective. No more pressure on my throat. I held my thumb over send and then pressed. He saw it immediately and went silent. We waited together with our shoulders locked like a wall. The reply arrived at the top of the stairs. "Understood." Then another beat. "Proud of you." He attached a thumbs up that made my stomach tip. Approval as a leash lands soft and tight. Inside her apartment, we kept lights ordinary and voices low. Lena lifted her phone and started a timeline. Every ping got logged with time and content. The numbers weren't random, and that chilled me more than bruises. I told her the detail I had hidden from myself. His grip held past the signal and then paused. Not confusion, not misread, a held beat that felt like a study. The word study tasted like metal, and I let it sit. We called a nurse's hotline and I spoke carefully. "Short blackout, pain swallowing, no dizziness now." They told me to monitor and to come in if anything spun. I touched the tender line and chose to stay where help sat within 10 steps. He sent a voice note with that smooth cadence. "Rest, I'll make you tea tomorrow." The audio ended and left a hush I didn't trust. I placed the phone face down and watched it anyway. "Back up everything," Lena said as she opened a folder. I sent photos to a cloud and mirrored them to hers. We labeled each one only with dates. I hated that this looked practiced and necessary. I tried calling my body back online. Water, slow breath, grounded feet. My hands listened, but my brain kept replaying the moment of release, not relief. Release planned and measured and repeatable if I stayed. "Where are you?" Another text blinked with forced casual. I typed with a friend and left it at that. The dots pulsed, then stopped, then pulsed again. Watching those dots turned my spine to wire. "Come home," he wrote after a respectful gap. "We'll talk." I heard the old trick inside the offer and named it. Talks scheduled under pressure are traps when one voice controls the clock. I asked a direct question to slice the fog. "Did you track the duration?" The dots appeared and paused. "Only during training," came back like a shrug in letters. Training for what stayed implied and worse than any emoji. Lena rubbed her forehead and let out a short breath. "He's not improvising." She scrolled, then pointed at the intervals. "He's testing compliance in cycles." I felt my voice shrink, then push back hard. I wrote, "No physical contact until further notice." Then I put the phone on the table and stepped away. My heart knocked once and then steadied. I wanted to see what boundary did to his tempo. His answer didn't come right away, and that saved me. The silence widened until my body relaxed one notch. I touched the tender line again and remembered the exact moment of blackout. Remembering without lying made me harder to move. When his response finally arrived, it carried a smile I could hear. "Proud of your clarity." Then nothing, no bargaining, no plea. The stillness in that choice told me I wasn't the only one collecting information. We set the couch with blankets and kept our shoes on. I made Lena promise to wake if my breathing changed. She made me promise to leave if he showed. We spoke like people who had learned time matters more than apology. Sleep didn't come, only a thin drift. I watched street noise and counted the gaps between pings. Those gaps formed a rhythm I recognized from earlier. Control likes consistency, and I wasn't going to fit it anymore. Near dawn, a new number flashed with a short line. I left because of him, then a name I didn't know. Lena and I traded a look that didn't need words. I typed back one question and waited for a door to open. The unknown number answered fast. "I can meet now." Her voice clipped each dub. "Ord like it hurt, lobby of your building, 10 minutes. The call ended before I could breathe right. We moved immediately, shoes on, phone in pocket. Lena grabbed her keys and held them like a warning. We took the stairs because waiting inside a metal box felt stupid. At the bottom, I checked the street and kept my shoulders squared. A woman stepped through the doors with her hood up. She looked at my neck and flinched. Mine looked the same. She touched her own collarbone and kept her hand there. I felt heat under my skin and didn't adjust my shirt. She slid a photo across her screen with a quick flick. Lines, swelling, a date stamped in the corner like a verdict. He told me it was progress. Her mouth tightened as if the word burned on the way out. "Why reach out now?" My voice tried to stay level and almost did. She glanced at the entrance and took 2 small steps closer. "Because he likes to refine." The word dropped like a tool on tile. I didn't let it roll away. She opened a zip bag and pulled out a folded square, lipstick pressed once at the edge. "He kept these." Her thumb hovered before she pushed it into my palm. I felt bile and recognition at once. The square matched what I'd seen disappear into his pocket. Lena's jaw set hard. "Where did you find them?" The woman's throat moved, drawer behind a false panel. She tapped her own wrist to show the spot. "Weak magnet, easy once you know." Easy sounded like a door I wished I hadn't opened. My phone buzzed with a new message that pretended calm. "Hope you are resting." Then a short gap and another line. "I made a mistake earlier." He typed mistake like a gift I should unwrap. My stomach crawled toward the exit. I asked the woman if he ever apologized to close distance. She nodded once and held my gaze. "He apologizes to calibrate." The word landed heavier than I wanted. I felt my breath slow to fight the pull of that idea. We checked my bag like it belonged to him. Lena ran fingers along seams and edges. A small hard shape clicked under the lining. She looked up and met my eyes, and I knew. The woman fished out a keychain tool and placed it in Lena's hand. The tag came free with a tug that felt too light. No brand, no label, just a tiny thing that proved my fear had teeth. Lena took a photo from 3 angles and dropped it in a sandwich bag. We would not throw away leverage. My screen lit with a call from an unknown local number. I let it ring out. A voicemail landed 30 seconds later. Breathing, not heavy, not fast, just steady and patient. I pressed play and watched the woman close her eyes like she recognized the pattern. "Time to involve security," Lena said and turned toward the desk. The guard lifted his brows when he saw the bag tag. "We'll review cameras," he said and reached for a notepad. He asked for names and phone numbers and the timeline. We gave him only what we needed to start pressure. The woman stayed near the elevator and scanned the doors. "He escalates when you resist, but not randomly." She rolled her shoulders like she was shaking a memory off. "He uses spacing. 17 minutes, then 34, then a long quiet." She had memorized the sequence, and I believed her. My phone chimed at the exact moment she finished that count. A single period in a blank message. A ping without words. He wanted attention without content. I didn't give it air. I took a picture of the blank bubble and added it to our file. We asked the guard for an escort to the car. He called a colleague and kept us in sight. The woman touched her pocket with the bag of lipstick proof and nodded once at me. "Document everything," she whispered, "and do not go back for closure." Her eyes dared me to argue. We reached the curb and the colleague scanned the sidewalk. No figure waiting, no car idling with windows fogged, just open space that felt dishonest. I got in and locked the door fast. I watched the entrance like it might spit him out. The woman leaned into the window and pushed a contact card across. "Detective Reyes understands patterns." Then she pressed her lips together like she'd said too much. "If he texts about breathwork, do not reply." Breathwork sounded like a trap disguised as wellness, and I wouldn't step inside it. As we pulled away, my phone pinged again with 2 words. "Proud partner." My throat clenched like a fist closed around it. He wanted the label to stick like a gold star. I stared until the letters blurred and then saved the screen without opening the thread. We drove 3 blocks and stopped at a pharmacy lot. I needed space to choose the next move. Lena opened a notes app and titled a new section with the time. We listed events in blunt lines that left out excuses. The list made me feel like I was tightening a bolt that had been loose for weeks. Another message hit with a photo of our hallway, clean carpet, closed doors, a timestamp that matched our departure by seconds. I felt the old panic rise and then flatten. Cameras had ang. Less we had copies, I refused to be hurted by a picture. Lena called the number on the card and spoke in crisp phrases. Active safety risk, evidence secured, sender knows location. She looked at me and raised one brow for consent. I nodded and felt the nod anchor me to the seat. The detective picked up and asked for 3 items only. Photo of Marks, screenshot of tag, thread with his exact phrasing. No speeches, no theories, just verifiable pieces. I sent them while my hands steadied enough to type. The woman texted from 2 cars back with a short update. I'm tailing for a block to check if he follows. My chest climbed and fell. I watched the mirror like it might confess. A white sedan turned and kept going. No chase, not yet. The reply from the detective arrived before my doubt could bloom. Stay with a witness, do not meet him, keep all devices on. Then a second line. We recognize this pattern. Pattern meant not unique, that cut and comforted in the same breath. A delivery driver approached our window with a small envelope. No name, just my number printed on a sticker. The guard from the lobby had forwarded it through the front desk. Lena signed while I watched the driver retreat without looking back. I opened the flap and slid out a printed strip, not letters, not a note, a row of times with tiny marks between them. Each row had a column labeled inhale and another labeled blackout. He had printed a log and mailed it like a trophy. I felt something settle that hadn't had a name until then. Fear turned into resolve with edges. We photographed the strip and sealed it with the tag and the lipstick square. Nothing went in the trash. Everything went into a chain we could show. I texted one line to him and watched the screen. Do not contact me again. No threat, no lecture, just a hard wall. The dots did not appear. The silence felt like the air before a door slams. We drove toward the station with the woman following at a safe distance. Lena's eyes stayed on the mirrors and her jaw unclenched by degrees. I pressed the envelope to my leg and let the weight remind me. He wasn't just reckless. He was organized, and I was done being studied. Reyes met us at the curb and waved us inside. Her stride matched our urgency and set the tempo. Show me only what proves the risk. She held the door and scanned the street like she expected company. We spread the items on a plain table and waited. She slid on gloves with quick snaps. Order matters, she said, and lined everything in sequence. My throat hummed with nerves that wanted out. Start with the tracking piece. Lena pushed the bag forward and kept her face neutral. Reyes angled it toward the light and nodded once. We'll sweep your other things next. I felt the floor steady under that promise. The woman placed the printed rows beside it. Reyes leaned close and traced gaps with a capped pen. Intervals show rehearsal. The word clipped clean and landed hard. I pressed my hands flat to keep them from shaking. Any record of forced silence? Reyes glanced up and waited. I opened the audio and let the breath play. She stopped it halfway and wrote 2 numbers. Cadence like this is control training. The phrase made my molars grind. She dictated a short statement template and kept it tight. I filled blanks with times and concrete actions. No adjectives, she reminded without looking up. Facts, then breath, then more facts. I could do that. A deputy entered with a handheld scanner and gestured for my bag. He moved it slowly, then paused over the spine. There. Reyes flicked a look and he marked a tiny X. Another device rested under the material like a rotten seed. The deputy sealed it and labeled the evidence pouch. He turned the scanner toward my jacket cuffs and frowned. A faint chirp made my chest lock. He peeled back a seam and revealed a second disc the size of a coin. Reyes took photos and held each shot steady. You did not consent to being monitored. It wasn't a question, so I gave it a nod. Good, then we lean on stalking charges while we build more. Build more sounded like momentum I needed. My screen flashed with a new account request tied to my email. He was trying to access my backups as we sat here. Reyes raised a hand and spoke to Tech through the door. Freeze all account changes. The words calmed a part of me I hadn't noticed. A receptionist knocked and slid an envelope through the gap, name handwritten in careful block letters. I didn't touch it. Reyes lifted it with tongs and peeled the flap. Inside sat a clean napkin stamped with a time range. Always times, always neat. My mouth flooded with anger that tasted medicinal. Reyes jotted down the range and circled it twice. He wants you on his schedule. I nodded and felt the nod harden into something else. Schedules can be broken with one decisive no. The woman's phone buzzed and she turned away to answer. He's pinging my old number again, she said and rolled her wrist. Blocked, he will ease. Calate to physical proximity next. I caught the way she braced her shoulders for impact. Reyes set 2 officers to watch the entrances and exits. We keep you visible until we serve papers. Her tone stayed even but her eyes scanned like sonar. I breathed easier under that sweep. Can I change devices today? I held up my phone like a contaminated item. Reyes nodded and gave a short list. New number, new email, freeze credit. He loses leverage when he loses prediction. A printer clacked in the corner and produced forms: temporary protective order request, stalking documentation, consent withdrawal notice. Reyes pointed and I signed where she tapped. Each stroke made my chest lighter and sharper. My screen lit with a photo of my building lobby from earlier, same angle as before but closer to the entrance mat. Reyes took my phone and uploaded it to the file. Same camera, same timing. She marked the metadata and set it aside. A radio chirped and the deputy answered with 2 words. He's outside. The hair on my arms rose before my brain processed it. Reyes lifted her palm to quiet us and spoke into her mic with crisp commands. We moved to an interior room with one narrow window. Lena squeezed my shoulder once and then stood angled toward the door. I counted my breaths and kept them slow. The slow felt like an act of rebellion he wouldn't get to measure. Footsteps passed and paused. A metallic tap. A door opened somewhere down the corridor. Reyes stayed visible in the hall and let her hand rest near her belt. Waiting felt like standing on a thin plank over deep water. The deputy returned 3 minutes later with an update. Vehicle matched, driver left on foot. Reyes didn't flinch. We have him on external cameras. She spoke into the radio again and told someone to hold the car. My voicemail icon lit up with a new clip. I didn't play it. I handed the phone to Reyes, who transferred it with a cable and pressed headphones to her ears. She listened, then removed them slowly. He's counting in whispers. A chill ran through me like a wire tightening. She dialed a number and gave a directive to patrol. Pick up for questioning, probable cause on tracking devices and harassment. The room seemed to lean toward that sentence. I wanted to be the person who leaned too. Lena cracked her neck and exhaled through her nose. You ready to go home for a sweep? My muscles objected, but my mouth agreed. Avoidance feeds the pattern. Exposure with backup breaks it. Reyes assigned 2 officers to walk us to the car. The woman chose to follow in her own vehicle and text updates. I pocketed the temporary order copy and felt its edge press my skin. Paper can be a shield if you hold it up. Outside, air hit harder than expected. An engine idled across the street, then cut abruptly. Reyes looked that way and nodded to an officer who moved without noise. I kept my chin high and my steps even. We pulled into my block and parked under angled cameras. The officer checked the entry and waved us through. Reyes lifted a small antenna wand and swept the hallway. It clicked near the ceiling corner and stopped near the doorframe. They opened the door and moved with practiced efficiency. Drawers untouched, clothes undisturbed, nothing obvious yet everything humming with the memory of his hands. My stomach flipped and then settled because we were not alone. The wand popped again beside the nightstand and Reyes pointed. The deputy lifted the lamp base and shook his head. False alarm. The real signal came from the underside of the bed. A wafer-thin square clung to the frame with a strip of adhesive. Bag it, Reyes ordered, and the deputy sealed it quickly. He scanned again and paused near the closet rail. Another wafer came free with a smooth peel. My lungs tightened then loosened when it disappeared into the pouch. Ray's glanced at me and raised one eyebrow. He watched and recorded duration in his own space. I nodded but felt the nod change into tired fury. He collected data where I slept. I was done being a source. My phone vibrated in my pocket with a new tone, unknown caller. I declined and showed Ray's the screen. She walked to the window and peered through the slat. He's on the far sidewalk watching the entry. She spoke into her mic and gave the location. Officers moved fast and quiet down the stairwell. We stayed back while the radio relayed positions. My chest lifted and fell as boots pounded below. Then a short burst over the radio. Contact. Another beat. Detained. The word landed and my knees almost gave. Ray's kept us inside and made a quick call. Bring him in for questions only. Hold the vehicle and devices. She hung up and turned to me with a steadier face. We proceed by the book because he will challenge process. I nodded and felt energy rush back like I had plugged in. Ray's handed me a small aluminum sleeve. Put your phone in here until we finish resets. The edges scratched my palm and anchored me to now. We gathered the last pieces and sealed the apartment. Ray's wrote times on a sticker and pressed it over the lock. If anything shifts, we know. She looked at me like I might apologize for breathing. I didn't. Back at the station, a clerk processed the order and stamped it. Ray's reviewed the intake and tapped one line. Violation triggers arrest. The clarity lifted something heavy off my ribs. Clear rules beat pretty words every time. The woman texted from the parking lot with 3 words, "I'm here still." I stepped outside to meet her under the awning. She handed me a small notebook with dates and places. Use it if he claims confusion. Her eyes shone with hard-won caution and I swallowed it like medicine. Ray's brought us both back in and closed the door. He will try benign language next, she warned with a thin smile. He will frame this as devotion. I pictured the printed rows and felt my mouth harden. Devotion doesn't come with timestamps and tags. They let him pass the glass hours later with wrists behind his back. He kept his face smooth and his eyes steady. He looked at my reflection instead of me and smiled like we shared a secret. I held his gaze through the glass and let mine say the new truth. You no longer get my breath. The first message from him arrived before sunrise. Mutual mistake, 2 words, no warmth. Ray's forwarded it to evidence and lock. Ked my screen in the sleeve. My throat tasted copper and I wanted to punch a wall. They put me in a small room with a recorder. Short answers, Ray's reminded, tapping the table twice. I spoke in clear beats and kept my jaw tight. Every sentence landed like a nail because I wanted structure over fog. A clerk walked in with a stamped order. Service scheduled within the hour. Ray's slid it to me and nodded once. Paper has edges and tonight I wanted edges. They processed him down the hall and kept him moving. I watched the glass until he passed with that flat smile. He glanced at my reflection again and tried to own the space. I let the silence own him instead. A tech returned with my bag and 3 new pouches, more trackers, one tucked in the lining of a spare tote, one under the lip of a compact mirror, one in the heel of a shoe. I swallowed anger and logged each one with a time. Phone number swap now, Ray's said and pointed to a workstation. I chose fresh credentials and burned the old ones. Alerts pinged from my accounts as he tried password resets. The system blocked them and I finally took a full breath. The woman from before stepped in with a neat folder. She placed a flash drive inside a clear sleeve. Pulled from his gym locker, she said and looked at Ray's. He keeps backups away from home. My stomach dropped then steadied because proof was better than panic. Ray's opened a laptop and scanned the files without ceremony. Rows of timestamps, short clips of necks and wrists. No faces, only close-up angles with text overlays. She closed the lid and wrote a line I didn't read aloud. They walked me to a safer room when his attorney arrived. Voices lifted in the hall and then quieted fast. I stared at the ceiling and counted steps through the floor. I wanted noise and got order, which helped more. My phone buzzed inside the sleeve with a truce message. We both overdid it. The screen showed it without opening the thread. I turned away and practiced the sentence I would keep using. Do not contact me. It changed how I sat in the chair. Ray's came back smelling like cold air and coffee. He denies all tracking, she said while rubbing her knuckles. He claims training tools for sport. She lifted a brow and almost smiled. The flash drive worked against that claim like a pry bar. We left the station with 2 patrol cars and clear instructions, straight to Lena's, no detours. If a car followed, we were not to be heroes. I nodded and tucked the paper order against my ribs. Halfway there, a motorcycle slid up behind us and lingered. The officer behind us blipped a siren once and it peeled away. My jaw unclenched by a fraction, then locked again when my pocket vibrated. A new number flashed with a single character, a 0 like an empty clock. I screenshotted it and sent it to Ray's along with the time. She replied with a thumbs up and one word, logged. The word soothed more than any apology ever could. At Lena's door we paused while 2 officers scanned the hall. She opened with her hair tied up and eyes hard. "Inside," she said and ushered us in. She touched my arm once and then started clearing couch space like a medic. We spread our notes and built a tight sequence. No theories, only specific actions. We pinned the printout with a strip of tape and numbered each row. The numbers looked like a map I could finally read. The woman texted again and asked permission to share my boundary message with another survivor. My chest compressed and then expanded. "Yes," I wrote, because more light meant fewer places for him to hide. She answered with a checkmark and a short thank you. An officer at the window murmured into his radio. A car had parked across the street and turned its lights off. Another unit circled and rolled slow past the bumper. "Plate run, registered to a rental in his name." My jaw clicked and I steeled my spine. Ray's called and put me on speaker. "He bonded out fast," she said like a weather report. "Your order is served. He cannot come within the listed distance or initiate contact." She paused and let that sink in. The pause held weight and I held it back. I turned my phone over and over until it stilled me. A new email came to the burned account anyway. Subject line only. "Data can be beautiful." I took a photo of the screen without opening anything and sent it to the evidence address. Then I shut the account for good. Lena brewed tea I didn't drink and set it aside. I paced the hall to keep energy from boiling. My throat ached where the line curved under my jaw. I pressed 2 fingers there and promised myself I would never forget that lesson. A knock landed 3 times at the door and everyone froze. The officer checked the peephole and relaxed. "Delivery." He opened and accepted a padded mailer with my name, no return. He sprayed it with solvent and cut a thin end. Inside lay a small metronome, silent and heavy. No battery, no brand, just a mechanism waiting for a finger. I stared and didn't touch. Ray's picked it up with tweezers and wrapped it in plastic. "Taunt," she muttered, "also a gift we can test." We slept in shifts with an officer on a chair by the door. I tried to close my eyes and saw his smile against glass. I opened them and saw Lena dozing lightly on the couch. Relief and guilt fought until exhaustion won for an hour. Morning brought a courthouse hallway and hard benches. The woman sat to my left and handed me water. "We do not look at him when they bring him," she said quietly. "We look at the judge." I nodded and locked my eyes on the wood grain ahead. He entered between 2 deputies with hands free. He wore composure like a pressed shirt. He scanned the row and landed somewhere near my knees. I kept my gaze straight and my breath steady out of sheer stubbornness. The hearing moved fast and clipped. No bond change, order reaffirmed, surrender of devices ordered for forensic imaging. His lawyer argued burden and the judge cut through it with one sentence. "The safety of the protected party controls." My spine lengthened and stayed that way. We left through a side door flanked by officers. Outside, a reporter lifted a microphone and called my first name. I shook my head and kept moving. The woman stepped between us and shielded my face with her shoulder. I let her because pride can wait when safety plays. Back at Lena's, we found 2 more messages sent during the hearing. One to my work email, one to my old number, both with links that looked like calendar invites. Breathing lesson at 9. I felt bile and anger rise together like a tide. Ray's arrived with a small team and a box of cables. They took the metronome and the flash drive to a back room. They imaged Lena's Wi-Fi router and scanned her hall again. She apologized for the intrusion and I hugged her without words. Midday, he posted a public apology on a fitness forum. It framed me as adventurous and self-directed. Consent implied everywhere yet somehow not asked. The comments split between worship and concern. Lena's jawline sharpened as she read aloud 3 sentences and recorded their URLs. We sat with Reyes and went through each post. She highlighted phrases he reused and dates he layered. He wants to control the narrative before we do, she said while jotting arrows. We answer with documented facts and let him drown in his own pattern. I exhaled without trembling for the first time since the station. A neighbor texted Lena with a quick video from the alley. A man moved a bag from a trunk to another car. Zoom in, paused frame. The man's shoulders gave him away and the outsole of his shoe matched earlier footage. Reyes dispatched a unit and told us to stay inside and wait. 10 minutes stretched like chewing glass until the radio popped. Vehicle secured, then a longer pause that made my heart trip. We have a laptop and loose papers. Reyes let out a breath and nodded to herself like a chess player. We were cutting off his angles and it felt righteous. They brought the bag to the station and cataloged contents under 2 cameras, a collection of breath timers, a folder labeled routines, a printed chart of recovery times that aligned with my screenshots. The tech handed Reyes a tablet with a mirrored directory and stepped back. Reyes scrolled and stopped on a document titled Improvements. Short bullets, less pause after tap, maintain eye contact during release, do not comfort immediately. My stomach flipped but my head went calm. My instincts had not invented the menace, he had written it down. She drafted an additional citation and called the prosecutor. We add stalking enhancements, she said and underlined 2 sections. We show intent, we show planning. I watched her mouth shape those words and felt the world tilt toward fairness. Evening settled like a hand on my shoulder without squeezing. Lena ordered food and shoved half toward me. I ate because I needed fuel for the next hour. Survival takes calories no matter how much adrenaline tries to argue. A ping hit my new number despite the precautions. Unknown contact through a messaging app. One last check-in. The text was followed by a photo of my building mailboxes. The angle came from inside the vestibule. The timestamp was live. I handed the phone to the officer nearest me and stepped back. He radioed the team across the street and they moved. I heard shoes on tile through the mic and a barked command, then a scuffle, then quiet that rang. Reyes called 3 minutes later with crisp relief. He violated the order inside your building. We have him on video and in custody. She paused and added one more line. He had a new tracker in his jacket. My lungs burned and then cooled like I had finished a sprint. They transported him to holding for a second booking. The prosecutor filed a motion to revoke bond. We waited for the judge to sign and tried not to stare at the clock. Waiting is an action when you are protected by paperwork. I walked to the bathroom and lo. Oaked at my neck in the mirror, the discoloration had faded to a faint arc. I pressed a fingertip there and felt rage and clarity rise like twin tides. I would not explain this mark away. I would use it. Back in the main room, I opened the notes again. I wrote a single paragraph addressed to myself. Do not negotiate. Document every contact. Tell someone where you are always. Love doesn't hide devices and praise endurance like a game. My work manager called and asked if I needed time. I told her the bare minimum and she removed my meetings. She offered security at the office and I agreed without pride. The offer felt like scaffolding while I patched the structure. Reyes returned near midnight with a small smile. Bond revoked pending hearing, she said and leaned on the doorframe. He broke the order with intent documented. She placed a photocopy on the table and tapped the judge's signature. My knees wanted to buckle and I didn't let them. We packed a go bag with things that mattered now. Charger, ID, plain clothes, nothing sentimental. Reyes watched and reminded me that travel to friends would be escorted for a week. I nodded and felt the plan bolt into place. Lena hugged me once with her arms tight and short. You breathe how you want, she whispered near my ear. On your time. I laughed once and the sound surprised me with its strength. I lay down for an hour and woke to a quiet room. No pings, no knocks, only the hum of a fridge and an officer flipping a page. I let my lungs run their own pace. In, out, no one counting, no one holding. Before sleep took me again, I wrote one more line in my notes. I will tell this story exactly, without flinching. Then I set the phone face down and closed my eyes on purpose. I drifted knowing the next chapter belonged to my timing, not his. The jail call request hit my phone through the portal. I pressed decline and logged the minute. Reyes texted one word that mattered. Good. My heart kicked once and settled into a stubborn march. We filed a formal statement with the prosecutor that morning. Short lines, crisp verbs, no room for spin. I read it out loud and felt each clause lock into place. He tried again through his friend with a soft opener. He cares. Lena lifted a brow and took the phone from my hand. No contact, she wrote, then blocked the number with finality that hummed. Ray's team returned my apartment after the judge revoked bond. They brought a locksmith and a worker with a handheld scanner. The wand chirped near the thermostat and quieted under the cabinet. 2 thin wafers came loose and slid into labeled sleeves. I walked the rooms and called out what belonged to me, not memories, practical things, clothes, files, chargers, each item into a clear bag, each bag into the trunk under an officer's watch. My body kept bracing for the next ambush. I let it. Readiness kept me upright. Fear without action always sinks. I worked the list and my ribs loosened 1 notch. At the station, a tech spread my screenshots across a monitor. He pointed at overlaps and drew lines with a stylus. Consistent methodology, he murmured while Ray's nodded. The phrase turned my stomach and sharpened my focus. The woman arrived with another flash drive and a tight mouth. Found in an old drawer, she said while tapping her knuckle. Text files, contact names with initials, a checklist that used verbs like refine and test. I watched Ray's jaw flex. We met the prosecutor in a spare room after lunch. She was compact and relentless. I want clarity from you, she said with her hands flat. Can you testify to the signal and the pause? I met her eyes and said yes because I remembered the delay like a scar. Training recorded my breath without consent. I said the sentence and hated its truth. The prosecutor wrote 2 words on a pad and underlined them. Without consent, the line carved through my doubt like a blade. News crept into our corner despite efforts. A blogger posted an article with his forum apology. The headline tried to be neutral and failed. People commented in piles with stories that smelled familiar. Lena collected 3 and sent them to Ray's with times attached. I changed my number again and set up 2-factor on everything. The new device stayed in the aluminum sleeve when I slept. Habit formed faster than rest. My body kept expecting the ping that meant control. The detective's phone lit with a search warrant confirmation. They would image his laptop and cloud accounts that night. I breathed out and held the exhale a second longer than usual. Choice returned in inches, not miles, and I marked every inch. We drove to my building with 2 cruisers tucked behind us. I wanted my mail and nothing else. The officer scanned the foyer and waved us in. I opened my box and lifted out a single envelope with a typed label. Inside, a strip of paper listed days and short notes. Hydration level, response to grip, eye focus, no signature, just cold observations. I bagged it and handed it to the officer without flinching. Ray's called while we stood there. Laptop holds a spreadsheet with multiple names, she said. Yours appears twice with highlighted rows. I leaned on the opposite wall and steadied my breathing with a counting trick that belonged to me. We went from there to a small gym around the corner. The owner had found a locker rental under a false name. He opened it for police and stepped back fast. Inside sat a fold-out metronome and a disposable phone with cracked glass. I watched them catalog everything without touching. The deputy read the outgoing texts and frowned. They used phrases like recalibrate and target window. My fist tightened until my nails bit skin, and then I opened it slowly. A survivor group met that evening in the library basement. Lena insisted on escorting me inside and took the seat near the aisle. I listened to 3 stories and recognized sections of mine hiding in them. I spoke 2 sentences and stopped when my voice wobbled, then forced it steadier. After, a counselor handed me a list of clinics for evaluation. Short fainting spells deserve attention, she said while pointing once. I booked the earliest slot and saved the confirmation. Bodies remember what minds deny, and I wanted both on the same team. Night dragged with its usual tricks, so we worked instead of waiting. We organized files by event and tool, timeline on the left, messages in the center, photos on the right. When I stopped, I felt firm ground under my shoes. The prosecutor called at dawn with new charges added: stalking with tracking enhancements, unlawful surveillance, tampering. Each count built weight where I needed it. My shoulders lowered and my chin came up an inch. A defense investigator tried to contact me through a mutual acquaintance. Statement opportunity, the text offered like a treat. I sent a photo of my protective order and the monitored numbers. He wrote back with one word, understood. I measured that pause and filed it anyway. We met with HR at my office under a duty to protect plan. Security issued a temporary badge with restricted access. They offered an escort from the garage and a direct line to their desk. I accepted and did not apologize. Midweek, my bruising faded enough that swallowing no longer hurt. I ran a finger along the fading curve and felt something cold and decisive click. I had lived through the blackout and returned with receipts. That certainty gave me a spine I trusted. Reyes handed me a printed copy of the forensic notes. No decoration, only lines and ticks and clean headings. She tapped a column that matched my screenshots by minute. He documented his own case, she said with a tiny nod I wanted to pocket. We sat in the prosecutor's office and practiced testimony. Questions came fast and sharp. I matched them with clean answers and no digressions. When she tried to rattle me with his forum phrases, I looked at the stickers on the file and felt steady. He filed a counter-complaint claiming harassment, a grasping move. The prosecutor laughed once and filed a motion to dismiss. The judge scheduled argument for Friday and I circled the time with a black pen. On Thursday night, the woman sent a photo of a notebook cover, his handwriting. A single line written 20 times like homework, perfect compliance. The repetition crawled along my skin and stopped under my jaw, and then rage burned it off. Friday morning, we passed him in a hallway on the way to court. He looked at the floor and then at my hand. I kept my hand open and neutral. The deputies shifted and his attorney tugged his sleeve like a leash. Inside, we took seats and faced front. The judge read the violation report and stared over her glasses. Bond remains revoked, she said, and signed the order with a swift stroke. I found my breath moving without supervision and held onto that. He tried to catch my eye as they turned him to the side. I focused on the seal behind the bench and blinked once. It felt like lifting a weight I used to drop. I kept it up and refused to meet his gaze. We left through the side door again and entered a corridor full of noise. A reporter stepped forward and asked if I blamed myself. Lena angled her shoulder between us. Survivors do not owe commentary, she snapped, then walked me away at a measured pace. Outside, rain started with a sudden strike and cooled the concrete. We ran to the car and laughed once when puddles splashed our ankles. Laughing felt like oxygen, unexpected and true. The counselor's office called with test results that afternoon. No structural issues. Monitor symptoms, follow up if anything changes. I thanked her and ended the call. Relief came without bursting. It slid in and made room for action. We carried the last of my things into a new apartment on a busy block. Cameras watched the entry and a doorman wrote every name. I signed the lease with a firm hand and a quiet smile that belonged only to me. That first night I set 2 alarms for more. Ning, not to control breath, to make breakfast and meet the locksmith. Rituals that favored living rather than endurance. Simple, grounded, chosen. He attempted a final gambit through a long email to my work. Flowery language, misused therapy terms, a promise of growth if I returned. HR routed it to legal and sent a support note to me. I deleted the preview and went back to my task list without flinching. The woman texted a photo of her own new key. Reset achieved, she wrote with a spark emoji. I sent back a single line. Same here. We didn't need more words to know what that meant. We met Reyes for coffee across from the courthouse the next week. She slid a thin folder toward me and waited for me to open it. Inside sat a printed letter from the prosecutor. They were proceeding to trial, plea not accepted. I looked up and felt the corners of my mouth lift. Will you take the stand? Reyes asked while stirring her cup. I nodded once and folded the letter back into the folder. I will answer every question, I said, and meant it with my whole body. I walked home along a crowded block and checked my shoulders. No vehicles slowed, no pings arrived. My lungs chose a steady rhythm that didn't care about counts. The air entered, the air left, nobody timed it. Back in my place, I set the metronome copy on the counter, not the one he sent, one I bought with a purpose he would hate. I clicked it once and let the arms swing while I cooked, not as a drill, as a reminder that I set the pace now. Night fell and I wrote 3 pages for the prosecutor, questions I expected, answers that held hard lines. I ended with a statement to myself. I am not an experiment. I placed it at the top of the stack and slept. When sleep broke, I woke without a gasp. I reached for water and glanced at the door. The lock rested where we installed it and the seal held. My rib cage matched the steady drone of the city and I let it guide me. Trial would bring fresh tactics. I could feel the storm forming just beyond the date-stamped notice, but fear had changed shape. It stood beside me and kept watch rather than sitting on my chest. In the morning, I tied my shoes and wrote a message to the group. Court date set, standing firm. 5 replies came in with hearts and fists and brief lines. I smiled at the screen and slid the phone into my pocket. Before I left for work, I paused at the mirror. The line on my neck had faded to a whisper. I traced it once and let my hand fall. It no longer begged for my attention. It served as proof in a story I control. I locked the door with a decisive turn and listened for the click. A small sound, a simple action. It landed like a drumbeat that only I could hear. I stepped into the hallway and kept walking.